of whatever age, race, class, ethnicity, physical ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious background. We welcome especially those joining us for the first time. We invite everyone to join us downstairs after service for coffee, snacks, and conversation. I want to take this opportunity to remind us of our covenant, which was approved by the congregation in May of 2023. The Health Congregation Committee then composed this condensed version for brevity's sake, but I encourage you all to read the full version, which is posted all over the building. Loving kindness guides us as we come together in a spirit of generosity, respect, and empathy, mindfully aware of each other's inherent dignity and worth. We have a few announcements. Our worship staff, Reverend Sabrina, Music Director Gates Thomas, and RE Director Tiffany Kaldenbach, are now engaged in a broad effort to streamline the planning and the flow of our services. As part of that overall effort, we are changing the spotlight to announcements and will now coordinate them in advance. If you have an announcement for a Sunday service, please send it to office@uucqc.org by noon on Thursday before the service. I mentioned a moment ago that I am serving today as a worship associate. The worship staff is seeking ways to broaden participation in our services and to ease the burden upon lay leaders writing a sermon for a given Sunday. If you are interested in participating in a service in any capacity, as a worship leader, associate, chalice lighter, reader, hymn leader, or something else, please email Reverend Sabrina at minister@uucqc.org. We will hold a training on Saturday, December 7th at a time to be determined. There will be a sign-up sheet in the office, or you can send an email to minister@uucqc.org with the subject line Worship Associate Training. The chalice chimes are back and we need you. We are looking for anyone interested in playing chimes. Gail Springer is willing to lead the group and has been working to get the chimes back into ringing shape. We need at least 6 people to get rolling. You don't need experience. We accept beginners lovingly. You just need to know left from right and how to count to 4. We can teach you the rest. Please see Gail with questions or email music@uucqc.org. Gail would like to meet with everyone interested on or before November 20th to plan our new debut. You are invited. UUCQC will be hosting the 81st Interfaith Thanksgiving service, November 24th, 6:45 p.m. As host, we are responsible for providing the appetizers and desserts to share. Please let Jan DeGrieve know what you are able to contribute. Mark your calendars. UUCQC was well represented last year, and we hope to see you there. Finally, let me draw your attention to the additional announcements printed on the back of your order of service. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I'm Lori McCollum, and I use she, her pronouns. Today we reflect on the theme of repair. I want to share a reading from the Reverend Joan Javier Duval. Here is where you can lay it down. Lay down all that you have carried. The weight of the world that has rounded your back. Here is where you can rest, where nothing is expected but that you bring all of who you are. As Barb Thompson lights our chalice, let's all recite our chalice lighting words from W.H. Auden, which will be up on the screen in a minute. Or not. There we go. You who are broken-hearted, you who woke today with the winds of despair whistling through your mind, come in. You who are brave but wounded through life and hurting with every step, come in. Now please rise in body or spirit for our opening song, which is 1023 in the Teal hymnal, Building Bridges. Gates is going to play it through once, and we're going to do it 4 times. Please remain standing. In the spirit of love and fellowship, we now greet the holy in our midst by briefly greeting those around us, especially those we do not know. Good morning.
It started as a
We're going to play a short video that is going to help explain our first service project for the Magic of UU class. They'll be doing a series of service projects this year, and this one is going to tell us all about it.
simple tribute, and now you can find Little Free Libraries not just in all 50 states, but in 120 countries on all 7 continents. Through our 24/7 book exchange boxes, Little Free Library is building community, inspiring readers, and expanding book access for all. Today, nearly 70% of students entering the 4th grade cannot read at a basic level, making them 4 times less likely to finish high school. We believe the ability to access and discover a personally relevant book not limited by time, space, or privilege is empowering for all and has a meaningful impact on improving literacy. More than 300 million books have been shared through registered Little Free Libraries, and we couldn't do that without community support from schools, public libraries, civic organizations, businesses, donors, our vast network of volunteer stewards, and people like you.
So Northside Achievement Zone exists to end multi-generational poverty and create a culture of achievement in North Minneapolis. At each of our early childhood partner sites, we have a little free library. They are just a wealth of resource for families. One of our goals at NAS is to build home libraries for our Northside scholars, and these little free libraries have been an access point for that library building. Part of the initiative we've done presentation in the Little Free Libraries. When you watch a child open a book and see someone that looks like them, their face lights up. But it really does promote that love for literacy and just help that access point for those scholars to really start the literacy journey early.
Our vision is a Little Free Library in every community and a book for every reader. We work toward that goal every day by providing 24/7 book access, fostering new Little Free Libraries, granting Little Free Libraries to high-need areas, championing diverse books, and working with key community partners. And it's easy for you to get involved. Share a book in a Little Free Library. You can find one near you using our mobile app. Become a volunteer steward and start your own Little Free Library, or support our mission with a monetary donation. Give a little or a lot. All contributions help us continue expanding book access and support our programs. Little Free Library. Together, we're building community, inspiring readers, and expanding book access for all.
Are there any concerns online?
Not at the moment.
Okay, any joys? Thank you. Okay, thanks again. There are a few joys in the book. Marcy Doyle says, congratulations to Deshaun and Dom Quay, who advanced to blue belt on Thursday. They have been attending Taekwondo for 6 months and have gone through yellow, green, and now blue. There are also two joys regarding thanks for the vendor fair yesterday. Lori McCollum thanks everyone who worked at the vendor fair. And Diane Harrington also thanks everyone who helped make the vendor fair a success. The leftover food will be downstairs today, and any offering would be appreciated. Thank you for your support. For what has been shared and for what remains in the quiet sanctuary of our hearts, we are grateful. Let us become aware of the energy that brings us together in beloved community as we share a time of silent meditation. May we open our minds and hearts to a place of quiet, to a silent prayer for the healing of pain and the comfort of love. You are invited to come forward and light a candle during the musical meditation that follows.
This congregation is a theologically diverse religious community with membership open to all who are in accord with our values, mission, and vision. Our congregation is entirely self-governed by the democratic process. One of the privileges of our free church tradition is to provide all of the financial support for our many ministries from among ourselves. Generosity, therefore, is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and our institutional well-being. We are sharing this month's undesignated plate offering with UUA Disaster Relief Fund. For more information on how the UUA Disaster Relief Fund operates, please see the back of your order of service. We invite you now to participate in the blessing of giving as the ushers come among you to accept the gifts of the congregation. Please be as generous as you are able. For all the gifts of time and treasure that you give to this congregation with sincere gratitude, we thank you. Our reading today is A Circle of Healing by Starhawk. We are all longing to go home, to some place where we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned, we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done, arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends. We can be free.
Good morning. I want to mention that giving time to come up here and participate in services is really a blessing, and we welcome anyone who would like to participate both as worship associates or if you want to help participate in even coming up with a reflection. We have a new option this year. We are purchasing sermons through the UUA that you can observe and either use the video or use the script to help you devise your own reflection, and I've done that today. So that does make this job a little bit easier. I'm going to use one of those sermons today to anchor my reflection. It's adapted from one written by Reverend Tess Baumberger. She tells the story about her childhood. So right now I'm going to speak in her voice. Every spring on my family's farm in eastern South Dakota brought the task of fixing fences. After the blizzards of winter, the fences would be sagging, even broken in places from the weight of the snow, driven by fierce winds. Some of the posts would be leaning, dislodged by the inconsistent earth's freezing and thawing. So each spring, during the years after my sister had gone to college and before my younger brothers were old enough to help, I would help my father fix fences. We would walk the barbed wire fence around the pastures on our farm. I'd carry the lighter tools, the pliers, the wire cutters, the spare clamps, and my dad carried the wire stretcher and the post driver. We'd stop wherever the fence needed mending. If the problem was sagging or broken wire, he'd clamp the stretcher and 2 places where the wire was intact and ratchet the wire taut. He'd cut the wire held between the stretcher's clamps and use the pliers to reweave the ends tightly together. I'd hold my breath when he released the stretcher until I saw that the wires held. If the problem was a leaning or dislodged post, I'd get to watch Dad drive it back in. The post driver was a cast iron metal tube with one end blocked with thick metal. My father would put the tube over a post and then rise up on his toes, raising the driver high, and then bring it clanging down. I'd cover my ears as he moved up and down in a rhythmic working dance. And gradually, the post would sink straight into the ground, as if mesmerized by the grace and fluid strength of my father's movements. I'd watch until it was deep enough, and then I'd tell him he could stop. He would clamp the wires onto the post, and we'd move on, walking the fence line. My father died a long time ago, but this is a time of year when I remember him. His birthday was in October, and there's something about the turning of the leaves and the apparent death of all the plants that makes autumn a time when many of us remember those who have died. It may also be a time when we realize and remember that we won't live forever. At the time when our farming ancestors were harvesting and setting up their stores for winter, we take stock of our lives and see where there is abundance and where things are missing. In a time of cleaning out our homes, we think about how we can put our emotional houses in order too. It makes sense then that in many religious traditions, fall is a time for mending emotional and spiritual fences with both the living and the dead. The Jewish feast of Yom Kippur is about tending our relationships with the living, but also includes rituals honoring those who have died in the past year to help the living to grieve and move on. We mend fences with those who have died so we can move on from the regret and sorrow that can complicate our grief. We mend and then let go. We mend fences with the living for many of the same reasons. We wish to repair frayed or broken relationships because those breaks can be a source of grief, nagging and dragging at us. We also mend fences with the living because we recognize that we may not live another year. We would not wish to come to that final parting with such heavy, unfinished business between us. We would not want to live with the regret of harsh final words or cut off relationships. We would not want our loved ones to live on with that kind of pain. Reverend Baumberger tells a story of amended relationships and the connections that ensue. It's about her grandmother's secret. I'll tell it now from her perspective. My grandmother died when I was 11 years old with a great secret. We found out after her death that she had had a child before she met my grandfather and gave this child up for adoption. Her sister, my great aunt Esther, told us about my Uncle Dave. It turns out that my mother had known him growing up in her tiny hometown of 50 people, but didn't know he was her brother. My uncle found out my grandmother was his birth mother when he enlisted in the Navy and saw her name on his birth certificate. Apparently, he made contact with her and sent her some letters with pictures of him and his family. My mother had been surprised to discover these things, the correspondence and such, and it didn't even make sense to her until my great-aunt came to visit and gave that startling revelation. The story of my grandmother's secret ends well. My mother and her siblings made contact with my uncle. Within a few months, we met him and his wife and later some of their adult children, and they became part of our family. Exchanging visits yearly and gifts at Christmas, we fixed that fence for my grandmother, reweaving the family to include this lost son of hers. It is such a gift to have healed that breach. Now I'd like to share a story of my own. Reverend Baumberger's original metaphor about mending fences reminded me of my father. He wasn't a farmer, although his father was, and he grew up on a farm. And he and I never mended fences together. But he held those same values of diligence and practical knowledge and hard work. He expected his children to help out at home and accomplish real tasks, like mowing the yard or washing the car. It was not our job to be entertained. There was work to be done, and if our hands were idle, he would fill them with something. However, I don't want to depict him as harsh in any way. He was gentle and nurturing, and I don't think I ever heard him raise his voice. But the older I got and the more I learned about his life, the more I realized that his choices of how to be a father were not learned in his family. That was not how he was raised. As the middle child of 6, he grew up on a farm in the early 1900s. His youngest sister died in infancy. His mother had to quit school in the 4th grade to raise her siblings because her mother died in childbirth. She always seemed to me to be a sad woman. His father was the son of a Civil War veteran who died when he was a young adult, and then he had to split the family farm up 3 ways, my grandfather and his 2 siblings. And my grandfather decided in the early 1920s to raise thoroughbred racehorses for some reason. Life was not easy on the farm. Just to give you an example, my dad told this story of how he nearly cut off his little finger when he was working out on the farm, and my grandmother ran to the basement, gathered up a handful of cobwebs, wrapped them around his finger, and wrapped it up. He carried that scar his entire life. For those of you with any biology background, you might know that cobwebs are a source of antibiotics. Interesting common knowledge that people knew back then. Those would help heal things. I tell this story to give you a glimpse into how self-sufficient people had to be back then, 100 years ago. There were no walk-in clinics. There was no car to drive to a walk-in clinic. And you were 15 miles outside of town. My grandfather died when I was only 5, so I have few memories of him, and most involve heavy cigarette smoke and tulips. You might not think those things go together, but they did for my grandfather. He was a chain smoker, and if he didn't have a cigarette in his mouth, he was sitting at the table eating. He also had a large garden, the size of the full lot next to their house. It was crisscrossed with narrow paths between the flowers and the vegetables. He particularly loved tulips. And each time we came to visit, he'd let me pick one just before we left. I still remember the scent while I gripped it in my hand on the way home. In place of many years of memories, however, I do have a lot of stories, and many of them really weren't pleasant. He was very gruff with his children and highly critical of my father. Grandpa was a heavy drinker and gambler, and after the Depression ensued, people really didn't have the money to buy racehorses, and he lost the farm that had been in the family since before the Civil War. My dad's story was that he'd lost it all on a bet, probably at a racetrack. They then had to move into town after leaving the farm, and I was told that Grandma insisted the house be put in her name, so he couldn't lose that too. And this was back in the 1930s, when women didn't usually have anything in their names. I didn't realize how unusual that was at the time I heard the story, but it left me with the impression that Grandpa wasn't a very reliable guy. My dad left home at the age of 16, quit school, and started working out on the farms. And he told me that he never got an ounce of help from his parents his whole life. He married my mom at about 21. She was 17. Same thing, left home to get a job. He told me that Grandpa never gave him a word of encouragement, but only criticized his decisions, even when he decided to go into the car business, one that he made very successful in our small farm town. You might think this would have led to a schism and that I wouldn't have seen much of my grandparents, but no, Dad never let this history keep him away. We visited regularly, and he helped Grandma financially after Grandpa died. He was very close with his siblings. He may not have been close with his father, but he didn't seem to harbor anger or disappointment either. When he was entering his final years, Dad would talk about his childhood and mentioned that he and his father settled up before he died, suggesting that they acknowledged caring for one another. He told me that watching his father with me and seeing his gentle side, a side that possibly came with the wisdom of age, helped him see his father in a different light. Now, I'm not suggesting that all fences can be mended, because some cannot. Sometimes people may choose to walk away from damaging or disappointing relationships. But I can see that my dad decided to keep his options open, probably to stay closer to his mother, but it also gave him an opportunity to watch a change in his own father, and that allowed for a mended fence over time. And now I return to Reverend Baumberger's reflection. As I've been telling these stories, you may or may not have been thinking about your own experiences. You may have loved ones who died with secrets they considered to be shameful. You may have some of your own. You may have had a tough or unresolved relationship with a loved one, living or dead. You may have experienced cut-off relationships with family members or friends, some of which you've healed, and some of which still weigh on you. We may have emotional fences between us that for too long have been unwalked and unmended. Sometimes it's years before we fully realize where those strands of love were broken or strained under the weight of cold words whipped by fierce winds. If we can find the places where our own actions have strained or broken the wires, those are the places where we have the power to act, to attempt to mend them. Taking stock of our own actions and holding ourselves accountable helps break the victim mentality and gives us power. Recognizing our part in any breaks shows us where our power is or can be. Sometimes it takes a while to recognize where the strands of love need to be straightened or where the posts need to be grounded. If we have patience with the process, we may find those places, and we can work there to do what we can, to repair what has been strained or broken. So let us today, in this time of taking stock and preparing for winter, turn our hearts, minds, and spirits toward mending fences in our lives. This is a good time to perform that act of connection, and if we choose to move in that direction, stretching, reweaving, making them stronger, you can stop at the places where the posts and the deeds that support the strands of love are leaning or uprooted. You can straighten them and together perform the rhythmic working dance until they are deep, grounded, and rooted once more. You may find peace with someone else in your life. I invite you to enter this metaphor. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself walking a fence line with someone you love. Picture that person walking on the same side as you, or on the other side if that person has died. You're strong enough to carry all the tools this time. You can see where the fence needs mending. You walk along, touching with tenderness the places where the strands of love are strong and whole, where the supports stand straight. Sometimes you touch the same places as your loved one, sometimes different places. You stop wherever the wire sags or is broken. You may look remorseful or sad for a moment, but then you get to work. You clamp the stretchers onto intact places in the strands and pull them closer together. You work to make the strands straight again. You cut where they need to be cut, and together with your loved one, you may reweave the ends. You hold your breath as you undo the clamps and smile when you see that the line is holding firm. And if it breaks, you can try again. You move on. Eventually, you come to the end. Your work here is done. The fence may be whole again. You may reach out, sometimes through and across those strands to hug one another. You may move on together or in your separate directions, with peace in every step. You can return here to this place. You rest. And now, please rise in body or spirit for our closing song. 1010 in the Teal hymnal, We Give Thanks. Please remain lifted up as we extinguish the chalice and join in the unison reading. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. You may be seated. Our closing words today are from Reverend Sherry Woodbury. Out of the din of the city, away from the noise of the crowds, we come to rest in this moment, in this place, set apart from the never-ending to-do lists, embracing the seventh day, a day of rest. We come to the warmth and stillness of this sacred hour. Remember, you have chosen to be here. Something in your life led you to arrive here now. Whatever tasks and cares await you now for this brief time, simply rest. Allow your soul to be nurtured. Let the waves in your mind and heart gradually subside as you come home to yourself, holy and whole. Go in peace. And now the postlude.